First up, though, is the breaking news of the killing, the military strike that has taken out a major terrorist leader out of Iran, General Soleimani, who had flown into Baghdad to evidently follow up on the attack on our embassy in Baghdad that took place earlier this week. And Soleimani and another top Iranian front leaders, actually, two other terrorists and others were taken out by a strike by the U.S. military at the orders of the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Now, of course, the left is very much agitated by this. As I've long said, long observed, the organized left is controlled by advocates for terrorists. Now, do I mean they're terrorists? No. Do I mean they advocate terrorism? No. But I mean they're always out there defending and trying to protect terrorists from justice. And in this case, the United States acted in self-defense in the sense that Soleimani was allegedly involved in planning additional actions against U.S. interests in Iraq. Specifically, there had been a prior attack that led to the death of at least one American most recently. And then, of course, you had the attack on Baghdad, our embassy in Baghdad, and evidently he was there to plan more attacks. So there was an act of self-defense. But on top of that, he had been, as the leader of the Iranian version, the terrorist version of what would be the equivalent of our CIA and Special Operations Forces, but imagine the terrorist spin on all of that. Soleimani had been responsible for the deaths of hundreds, if not thousands, of American soldiers in the Iraq War. Remember all those IEDs and such that were blowing our soldiers up? They were pretty much all done courtesy of Soleimani's operators. On top of that, he's responsible for death and destruction across the Middle East, in South America, and in fact, he had tried to blow up an opponent here in Washington, D.C., but I think they had tried to hire one of the Mexican drug cartels to plant a bomb in a restaurant to take out someone, and that attack was averted. But despite all of his terrorist activities, and he was a designated terrorist, he was more or less given, he was protected by the establishment here. There were plenty of opportunities during both the Bush and Obama administrations to kill him, to protect and defend America, but they weren't taken. And there were always reasons for not doing it, and tactical decisions and political reasons for not doing it. But the president, being the type of president he is, saw that this man had been responsible for an attack on our embassy and was planning additional attacks. And so he defended the United States by taking him out. The left is going crazy because there are two elements. You have the leftists, again, advocacy on behalf of terrorists like Soleimani, and then you have the anti-American strain of the left, which almost instinctively reacts against any U.S. efforts to defend itself, militarily or otherwise. And then you have this kind of an amalgam of the two, is the Obama administration's, or the former Obama administration's leadership, many of whom are still embedded in the bureaucracies, who were big advocates of this Iranian nuclear deal that saw billions of dollars go to the terrorist leaders in Iran, as represented by Soleimani, and they saw their negotiating partners taken out essentially yesterday by the President of the United States. So they're outraged because that nuclear deal, which was probably terrible foreign policy, also they had so much invested in it, even though it saw us kowtowing to the Iranians and to terrorists and subsidizing our enemies in ways that few Americans supported. Actually, something that even split Democrats. Even Democrats are unhappy with the Iranian nuke deal that the president has backed away from. But this was a significant difference than the way the Obama administration handled the Benghazi attack. Because what I find very interesting is after this attack on our embassy that thankfully saw no Americans killed, you had the left gleefully saying, well, this is just like Benghazi. This is Trump's Benghazi. And of course, it's nothing like Benghazi in the sense that, that there were no lies about the circumstances of the attack. We all knew what was going on. If there were any lies about the circumstances of the attack on the embassy, it was from the media that was suggesting that it was organic, kind of like what Obama did about Benghazi, suggesting there were protests, when in fact there were no protests. This was an Iranian operation to attack our embassy in response to our bombing of certain locations because of their attack on us. So the Iranians have been escalating this fight with the United States forces there in Iraq, and this was part of that back and forth. On top of that, you had the Obama administration, again, lie about the circumstances of the attack, and then didn't provide the support necessary to defend our interests in Benghazi. Obviously, that's not the case here in Baghdad. We had the president deploy additional troops almost immediately and then take out those responsible within days. So that's a big difference. But I want to call attention more to the Benghazi issue, because now the left media is talking about Benghazi and comparing it and contrasting it to Baghdad in a fundamentally dishonest way. Benghazi was Judicial Watch's, one of Judicial Watch's most significant investigations. We uncovered the White House, Obama White House involvement in the big lie of that video and made them do it, when in fact it was an organized and planned terrorist attack. It didn't arise from spontaneous protests in response to a video. They knew that at the time, yet they lied about it. And we have the documents from the White House that show the White House was pushing that lie. It wasn't, quote, intelligence. It was a political decision by the Obama White House to try to spin the Benghazi attack in a way that would reflect favorably on Barack Obama, that he was taking, that it wasn't his fault, and that he couldn't be blamed for the attack that led to the death of a U.S. ambassador, the first time that had happened probably in a generation. I think the last ambassador that had been killed in action was our ambassador in Afghanistan during the Carter administration. So the lies about Benghazi were about protecting two presidential candidates. Obviously the re-election campaign of President Obama was going on at the time. He didn't want that news of that terrorist attack to get out the full truth, to interfere with his election. And of course, at the time, Hillary Clinton, we didn't know this directly, was considering running for president as well. So she had her legacy to protect as she was prepping her run for the presidency to succeed Barack Obama. So hence you had the Benghazi lies. But the specifics of what happened with Benghazi are really outrageous, and I'm glad I'm having the opportunity to talk about this again, because Judicial Watch exposed pretty much, like most major scandals going on here in Washington, D.C., Judicial Watch exposed the full truth about Benghazi in the ways that either that Congress was unable to, and frankly has still been unable to, and that the media wasn't interested in doing. We exposed, for instance, that there were multiple warnings that the special mission compound in Benghazi was going to be attacked, all of which were ignored. Did you know, for instance, that our local protecting force, we had basically outsourced protecting the compound to local militias, they had quit, and we had no local security, practically speaking, on the day of the attack, because they knew something was coming, because there had been prior attacks on the special mission compound. On top of that, of course, it occurred on September 11th, 2012, which is an indication of why, what the motive was, even though it was, and made it even more laughable, the lie that terrorists weren't behind it. So they were warned, and then once the attack occurred, you have to remember there were two attacks. You had the initial attack on the Special Mission Compound, and then about a mile or so away was a CIA annex, and that attack occurred several hours later, and two special operators, two former, I think they were two former CIA guys who were acting as contractors, were killed. Well, as immediately after the first round of attacks occurred, our military said, we've got stuff ready to go. We're spinning up and it's ready to go. And of course, if they had been deployed when offered, they could have gotten there in time, it's pretty clear, to defend and protect and maybe save the lives of at least two of the victims of Benghazi. Now, Judicial Watch uncovered that document. Congress outrageously had uncovered the document, had been sitting on it for a year, and the public only found out about it after we uncovered it, thanks to a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit. So the fact is that we had the ability to save lives in Benghazi, and Judicial Watch proved that the Obama administration delayed and the deployment of resources there to protect lives. And even worse, well, I shouldn't say even worse, because this is kind of just, to make matters worse, even after the attacks took place, as long as 6 hours after the attack, we still didn't have enough assets there to get our people out. They had one plane available, and they evacuated some personnel. Other personnel had to remain in Benghazi along with some of the dead. And finally, we got a Libyan government plane to take our people out. Isn't that outrageous? So the next time you hear Trump's Benghazi, you'll see that in President Trump's actions in quickly deploying forces, taking out the bad guys, there's nothing in comparison to what actually went on in Benghazi. And as you recall, there was no retaliatory strikes. Nothing was done. We sent the FBI there, I think, weeks after the attack. So after the locals had gone through the site, who knows what was lost. Just a terrible, terrible outrage. And ironically, it was because of our investigations into Benghazi, our FOIA lawsuits, did we find out about the Clinton email scandal. So, and just recently we uncovered that, yes, they were hiding Clinton emails about Benghazi. And that was one of the reasons, it looks like to us, that they were hesitant to tell us about the Clinton emails because they knew there were Benghazi materials in there. So it was just an unholy mess in Benghazi. It's still a major scandal, and outrageously, the State Department and the Justice Department, I've told you this before, are still sending lawyers to court to stop down our to try to stop our inquiries into questions about the ties to the Benghazi, between the Benghazi scandal and the Clinton email issue. Can you believe it? Just 2 weeks ago, we were in federal court. We still are in discovery thanks to a federal court who wants to know whether there are ties between the Benghazi scandal and the desire to cover up potentially embarrassing material and the State Department's and Justice Department's misleading and gaming and lying and obstructing and covering up Hillary Clinton's emails. So we're trying to get more answers on that, and the government sends, the State Department, Justice Department sends 6 federal lawyers to court to try to stop us from having those answers answered, those questions answered, excuse me. So the left is upset the president is defending our interests. The left is upset a terrorist was taken out, a terrorist responsible for a contagion of violence throughout the Middle East. But they're happy, seemingly, and it seems to me they're rooting for retaliation by the Iranians. It's just crazy. And one thing that Judicial Watch is doing, in addition to, obviously, with our Benghazi investigations, which, as I say, are ongoing, we've been trying to get information out of the administration about this shady Iranian deal, this nuke deal that saw cash being dishonestly dispersed to Iran, prisoner releases, things like that. And of course, we've been stonewalled by the deep state. And I keep on saying this, and I'll say it again because it's worth repeating. President Trump should order full disclosure on these Obama-era scandals. I don't understand why the agencies don't do it. The Treasury Department, Defense Department, State Department, they have all of the dirt on this Obama abuse of power and scandals and controversies, and getting information out of them is as difficult as it's ever been. The president should just go on a transparency tear on these issues. So as the left roots for retaliation strikes by Iran, I suspect the president made our position more secure in the Middle East and here at home by saying no to these terrorists in a way that they, I think, only understand, meaning you'll get killed if you attack the United States and try to kill us. It's a pretty simple response in many ways. Now, of course, the left is trying to complicate it by suggesting the president doesn't know what he's doing. Well, these are the guys who didn't know what they were doing. One of the aspects of Benghazi that the media doesn't want to tell you about, that of course we uncovered, it's perhaps our most important disclosure, is that out of Benghazi, arms were flowing into the Syria conflict, and we were supporting terrorists. We knew it. We have a Defense Intelligence Agency report that describes Western support for the terrorists battling Assad. Terrorists. We were supporting them. And we were being warned at the time, our DIA people were being warned, were warning us that Al-Qaeda had the potential, not Al-Qaeda, excuse me, ISIS had the potential to come in there and take advantage of the situation there and establish a caliphate, which is exactly what happened. All of this was tied to Benghazi. We have documents showing the Obama administration was very much aware of the arms being shipped to the Syrians, or the so-called rebels, i.e. the terrorists. And the level of detail suggests that either they were doing it or were in a position to stop it from happening. Obama and Hillary Clinton's efforts in Libya resulted in a vacuum. They allowed Gaddafi to be murdered, and it turned Libya into a way station for the jihadist efforts in Syria. And who rushed to Syria's defense? Soleimani, the Iranians. So we start supporting Al-Qaeda to go after Assad. ISIS comes in, starts going after everybody. The Iranians come in, support Assad, start attacking ISIS. What a mess, all created by Obama, all made worse by their efforts in Libya and exposed by the Benghazi attack. And we know about this, again, not to toot our own horn, but thanks to Judicial Watch. And I'm glad the president took this strong action, and hundreds of Americans were murdered by this guy, both directly and indirectly, and it's well past time that he met justice. You know, you may not know this, but you should. The ringleader for the 9/11 attacks still hasn't faced trial. He's still down in Gitmo. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, KSM. He's still down there. So it's good to see justice met out to the terrorists the way it ought to have been, or the way it should have been.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.